My first real experience with horror genre in gaming began when I fired up the first Resident Evil game. The only reason that I got the game in the first place was that I thought the guy was smiling in the cover picture, so I said, hey, this guy is having fun. This mistake ended up with a lifetime of trauma that I still have nightmares about because of, you know, the infamous scene. After I hit puberty, I was more confident with my capabilities. I assumed that I could handle a real horror game with upgraded graphics and fast-paced combat. And that, kids, is the story of how I met the Dead Space. By my surprise, I actually did manage to play the game and shit my pants simultaneously. I loved the experience so much that playing the Dead Space series was a big deal for me. I played all of them even though they gave me unending panic attacks. So when I heard that the ex-developers of Dead Space were working on a brand new IP, my excitement was off the charts. But then came the controversies during development and mediocre post-launch reviews, dimming my initial enthusiasm. However, we will get back to that in a bit. Just last week, while scrolling through the PS Plus games, Sony kindly reminded me that Callisto Protocol was about to leave the library by the end of the month. So I decided to embark on a journey. A journey that was so mediocre, it is actually impressive. So join me in this in-depth video, where I will discuss the controversies surrounding the game, dive into the gameplay, and explore some other aspects that I will come up as I am writing down this script. Let's face it, Callisto Protocol isn't a masterpiece. However, it excels in demonstrating just how okay a game can be. It offers a decent gameplay loop, an average story, competent action, though it's sadly lacking in the horror department. One thing it undeniably nails is its graphics. After the God of War, I never thought that any other game could come close to its cinematic style of graphics in cutscenes. But Callisto Protocol delivers with the graphics that has that next-gen feeling. The environments are rich and filled with intricate details. Interaction with surroundings might be limited, but visually it's flawless. Character animations, dialogues, and movements are top-notch. I have never realized how beautiful the game looks until I started to edit this video. So my advice, just stop every once in a while and enjoy the scenery. Story-wise, the game is almost exactly the same with its predecessor Dead Space. We end up in a prison, we escape with the help of an inmate, we kill mutants and confront the lunatic cult leader at the end, and yada yada. And the gameplay-wise, we also do similar things with Dead Space, with an emphasis on melee combat. On my first playthrough, I was actually impressed with the melee combat system. You can dodge incoming attacks, time your attacks, and deliver killing blows. However, after a while, it kind of turns into a monotonous dodge dance because there is no time window with the dodge. I simply have to press right or left when the enemy strikes. Also, enemies don't strike simultaneously, so it makes the combat extremely easy when you get the hang of it. I can't deny that I found some enjoyment in the game. It was fun to kill monsters using my telekinesis, bashing them to the floor, smashing their brains out, you know, the usual. However, the fact that I played through all of the Dead Space franchise, one could not help but wonder what the hell these guys were thinking. It feels like a cheap copy of Dead Space. Combat, story, gameplay, you name it. No one could convince me that these ex-devs came together to create a new sci-fi horror experience and all they could come up was this. The main premise was this is not a Dead Space 4. And they actually delivered it. This is not even Dead Space 1. It lacks the most important ingredient of a sci-fi horror survival genre has to have. The horror.
Horror and moral terror.
This game is mundane. Extremely predictable jump scares, lacking tension, and the feeling of, well, there is nothing to lose, was so up in the air that I was actually running past monsters to reach my objective sooner. But the gravest sin this game committed was introducing a blurry indicator that pops up when you're in combat or when an enemy is onto you. Who in the world thought that it was a good idea to notify the player when they are being chased or in imminent danger in a horror game? It's a shame they overlooked the most basic aspect of what makes a situation scary. The suspense. That constant sense of impending danger. It is the suspense that keeps you on the edge of your seat, waiting for something to happen. It is the lack of information about the situation that you are in that makes it 10 times scarier. After I realized this indicator, the game stopped being a horror game and turned into an action game. Map designs were somewhat linear compared to its predecessor. While there were opportunities to explore, they were infrequent and often led to minimal rewards. I would be much happier if this extra exploration is rewarded with some lore, but the game also lacks on the storytelling aspect. Throughout the game, we learn very little of this game's world and its history. Lack of inventory space in early game and perhaps in the late game is also extremely irritating. I understand that limited inventory space is a gameplay element that survival horror has to have. However, there is nothing to lose, no stakes. If my inventory is full, I just have to push through to the next printing station, unload all that shit, run back, grab the stuff, and sell them. You are not making me think about my next moves or cornering me with decision making. You are making me walk for another 5 minutes with no ramifications. It felt more like an inconvenience rather than a strategic element. You also have to watch this stupid animation every time you need to print something. Crafting system might seem basic at first, but in fact it's extremely basic. There are no game-changing upgrades to your weapons. You can only increase damage, increase ammo, or an occasional alternative fire mode. And these modes are almost exactly the same with one another, so what's the point? One other major problem is the lack of variety on the melee weapons. In a game where you spend most of your time with melee combat, it's undeniably stupid that you only get to have one melee weapon and non-existent upgrades. Okay, before I nail the coffin, there are two more minor issues with the game that I would like to address. As you know, we can use telekinesis in this game, which is a great tool to have, especially if you're in a space prison. Only difference with the Dead Space's telekinesis is that you can use this one on living enemies as well. You can throw them down, you can smack them to the ground, or you can impale them to these spikes that you can find in almost every room in the game. So what's the problem, you may ask? What the hell are these spikes on the wall? Like, what is their purpose? Who designs a prison like this? This thing here is the most unrealistic thing in the game. And we are in a space prison, killing mutants for God's sake. I also found it astonishing that the game underutilized the robots, except for the DLC. These intimidating looking robots could have been a significant threat, similar to Mr. X in Resident Evil, but instead they are easily killed with headshots. It's a missed opportunity to elevate the horror factor. And the ending? I have never felt this disrespected since the season 1 of Diablo 4, which is very recent when you think about it. Okay, so not that it means anything, but I am about to spoil the ending, okay? Here it goes. So we kill the final boss and we go to the escape pods, and there's only one escape pod. Of course there is, like, why are you surprised? So we sacrifice ourselves and save our friend. She escapes the planet and the camera comes back to us fighting with the monsters. And then this hologram doctor appears out of nowhere, and then she says, "Hey, there might be a way out, but I need your help." And then disappears, and then the game ends. So at this point I thought, okay, it seems they left a room for a second game, right? And then what do I see? They made the ending as a DLC. Just because of this move right here, I refuse to pay you any money. Like, why wouldn't you add that to the game, as it is the ending of it? In conclusion, I enjoyed Calisto Protocol to some extent. My disappointment, however, stems from the missed opportunities and lack of innovation. In many ways, it closely resembles Dead Space, which left me wondering why the developers didn't take more distinctive direction. Perhaps they played it safe after the hype they experienced during development. Now let's explore the controversies that surrounding its development and launch. With such talent on board, one might expect some similarities, but the outcome tells a different story. Developing a game during COVID must have caused some problems, obviously. Yet some issues emerged that we might have never known about if not for this revealing article from Game Industry. Former employees of SDS states that some of their names were removed from the ending credits due to their departure. Some states that people would come and go without a notice, like it was a normal thing in a workplace. Also, the rumors of crunch were confirmed with the statements from former employees as well. I'm going to leave all the links in the description if you want to read what happened. Nobody reads anymore, but whatever. Speaking of crunch, let's not forget the infamous tweet from G.Schofield where he glorified the crunch culture. Look, I understand if the development team voluntarily wants to spend their days and nights on their passion project, but there is no way in hell that you get to force your dream on people who's there for the money or the experience. Either you find people as passionate as you, which is hard to come by, or you suck it up. On top of that, the horrendous problems at the launch, major staggers on PC, and a whopping 90GB day one patch was the major red flags that all the critiques were looking for. If you want an in-depth look of what happened during the launch, I recommend checking Luke Stephens' video where he shares his own experience. This was supposed to be a next-gen game for new consoles. G.Schofield even mentioned that they aimed to create the scariest game on next-gen platforms. A substantial investment of $162 million was made in the game. However, by 2023, the game had only sold around 2 million copies, far from expected 5 million. In a significant turn of events, G.Schofield stepped down from his position on September 20th, 2023, alongside with Stacy Hirata and Johnny Su. The current CEO of the company is another former Visceral veteran, Steve Papadis, though their website hasn't received the memo yet. To wrap it up, my initial score for Calisto Protocol was a lukewarm 6 out of 10. But that was before I learned that they tucked the ending away in a DLC, a move I find rather distasteful. So my final verdict is a disappointing 4 out of 10. It's disheartening when a great potential falls short due to such decisions.